This is Elmer J. Shank, age 73, son of Clarence and Elizabeth Shank, and I'm trying to make a pictorial history of the Shank family. Myers Shank, born in Grant County, Ohio in 1841, moved to Paris, Illinois. His father died when he was 2 years old, and he moved back to Ohio and lived with family. Graduated college at Dayton in business. Married Eveline E. Reed in 1864. And they moved to Albany, Indiana in 1898. Eveline was born in Jay County, Indiana in 1845. She had a degree in music. They had 7 children. Our father, Clarence Shank, was born April 28, 1881, died October 16, 1968. Mother Elizabeth was born October 24, 1883, died April 23, 1945. Elizabeth's father was born in France and came to America when he was 17 years old. Could speak very little English. Her mother was born in Ireland and came to the U.S. when she was 3 years old. This is the 4 generations of the Shank family. Flora Shank, who married Ed Antrigan. Grace Shank, who married Bill Riddle. Shank, who married Sidney Schroyer. Frank Shank married Margaret Ray. Walsh Shank married Irene Goad, deceased, and then married Martha Selke. Shank married Winnie Spicer, deceased, and then married Tilly Anderson. Shank married Dolores Clevenger. Shank had Evelyn Shank, Rupert Shank, Joe Shank, and Marjorie Shank. And William Wasson had Harry Wasson, Ernie Wasson, Mabel Wasson. Shank married Edward Warren. They had Archie Warren, Richard Warren, Charlotte Warren, and Lillian Warren. This Shank was never married. Alan Shank died at birth. Laura Shank and Elmer Warner had no children. Jane Reed, her folks came from England in 1668. Abner Reed and Cynthia Adams, which branches down to George Reed and Mary Reed Hawkins, had the children, Ada Cook, and Otis Cook, half-brothers. Lucinda, Aunt Lucinda Woods, and Evelyn, who married Israel Myers Shank. From the Lucinda Wood family, we have the Meeks, Harvey and Flossie, which was Aunt Lucinda. These are the children of Grandma Alberts. This is a picture of Israel and Eveline's 3 boys. Clarence Oliver Shank on the right, Leif Shank in the middle, and Alpheus Shank on the left. This is Clarence Oliver Shank. Leif Shank. Alf Shank. This is an old family wedding picture. I do not know whom or year. This is our mother, Elizabeth. Our father, Clarence Oliver. Our uncle, Alpheus Shank. Do not know the year. Moved his family to Albany, Indiana in 1898. This is a picture of the glass factory in North Baltimore, Ohio. When this picture was taken, Alvin was not yet born. Zadie Mae, my father, Clarence. Laura, George, and Grace. On the bottom, Robert and Elmer. And Mother and Frank. Home was on North Parker Street, Albany, Indiana. That's Mr. Smith, Mabel's husband, Uncle Alf, Grace, Dick Warren, George, my father, Grandpa, Israel, and Mabel. Down at the bottom is Frank, myself, below Mother, and May. Mother on the right. A pistol on a piece of wood. The powder horn. I don't know who the other gentleman is. It's Alpheus Shank. Right is Clarence Shank, my mother Elizabeth Shank, me Elmer Shank, Grandpa Shank, and Flora Shank. Alf on the porch rail, Grace, and May, and George. Bottom, Marjorie Shank, Joe Shank, myself, Elmer Shank, and Robert Shank. Top, Aunt Myrtle, I don't know, Uncle Leif, Mother, and Dad. May, Frank, Rupert, and their mother. It might be Mabel Smith in the background. It's just a picture of some of the boarders on the porch of the old Grand Hotel. Is Uncle Alf holding the bottle, soda water bottle at the glass factory, getting ready for shipment. You can see cases of bottles ready to be shipped to the railroad. I do not know the fellow's name. The picture of the Hoosier Kitchen factory fire. They then moved to Newcastle, Indiana. That's the Engle flour mill in the rear to the left. Uncle Alf with the dog at the glass factory. The other gentleman's holding an elbow vent top. This is taken at the Gregory Farm in 1929. That's either Bob or Al, I think. Another picture loading bottles at the glass factory, loading a boxcar. The old paper mill on the west side of town. Uncle Alf was paymaster. My dad worked there as night watchman, and I used to make the rounds with him, scared to death. It burnt in a fire. The city of Albany gave this company 3 acres of ground if they'd moved their factory to Albany in 1898. This is a postcard from Charles Harrison to Leif Shank, who was working in Newcastle, Indiana. And that's a prescription of some kind. The State Street, Albany, Indiana, standing almost at Main Street, looking west. The Eagle Drugstore, owned by Charlie Harrison, Albany, Indiana, and that is Leif Shank in front, standing at the door. It's where the St. Clair restaurant is today. This is Elmer Shank playing Dad's trombone. Mother used to put the crock on my head to give me a haircut, which is modern today. 1992. 3. Our home on Parker Avenue. From left to right, Flora, Elmer, Mother, Dad, May, Frank, and George. About 1920. About the time this picture was taken, George was painting the roof of the house with black pitch. He dropped the bucket. Where did it hit? Right upside down on May's hair. She was a blonde, but after that she had real dark hair. This picture, Al, back 1929. George, May, myself, and Frank with baby lambs. We had to feed them on a bottle. Left to right, George, Alvin, Grace, Frank, and I think the cook's from Michigan, Mother, Dad, May, and that's Bob and myself on the bottom, sitting down. Al is in George's arms. On the Gregory farm. Bob and Alvin Shank in the front yard at the Gregory farm. Sunday dinner table set. The gasoline lamp. We thought we was in heaven with that. It was daylight at night. This is Dad and Alvin with the Overland Redbird, our first automobile. Dad never drove. I imagine it's Frank in the front seat driving, me on the fence. Dad and Uncle Alf and Alvin on the Gregory farm. May and George feeding a lamb. We would sell them at Christmas time for Christmas money. The mother would generally not claim 3, so we got to feed them on the bottom. Grace Shank with her Albany sweater for playing basketball. George Shank, been out in the woods cutting either firewood or logs to rebuild the barns after they burnt down. This is Dad with the axe in his hand where he'd been cutting firewood. This is Grace, and I think Bob's sitting down beside her. The barn is the one that burnt down. Bob and Grace feeding the lambs with bottles of milk. Another barn that burnt in the fire. This is Bob and I on the fence. I'm on the fence, Bob's with the bonnet, hat, and a dog. This is Frank trying to break a colt to lead. That barn also burnt down. The car was in the garage when it caught fire and Frank was able to get it out of the garage. That's a horse tank over to the right. That's the only thing left when the fire was over. This is a picture after the fire. The only thing left was the rail fence in the back, board fence, and the horse trough. Grace and her friend and Dad chatting on the board fence. Grace's friend, Grace, May, Uncle Alf, Dad. Down at the bottom, Bob and myself. Mother used to get mad at Uncle Alf because he's always wanting us to go to Little Rock or Arkansas and start homesteading and get Dad all worked up, but we never went. And he never went. Mother and Dad, Grace and her friend, and Alvin. Getting ready to combine wheat with the old binder. And Johnny took 4 horses to pull it. Getting ready to go to the field to plow corn. Dad had 3 horses and pulled a 2-row cultivator. George and Frank had 2 horses each, which pulled a single row corn planter. The Gregory farm home with a windmill out front. Dad and George buzzing firewood. All summer they'd stack firewood, and then when the weather got cold and they couldn't do anything else, they buzzed it up to keep us warm. We always jacked up the back end of a car and bolted a pulley on one wheel, and that drove the buzzsaw. That's George and Frank buzzing wood. Grace and her friend in 1929 with their dog. They brought us the first radio that we had ever heard. We had string antennas from the house to the barn to get 1 or 2 stations. Grace, Al, and Bob, and Grace's friend from Wisconsin. '28 or 9. Frank Shank on a binder, which cut wheat and put it in bales, and then it was shocked. Then it's picked up and hauled for thrashing. Uncle Alf and Alvin. Every Sunday he would ride his bicycle out or drive his Model A or Model T and bring us a little poke of candy. Almost every Sunday. May, Matt, Uncle Alf, Dad, and Frank. I'm eating a sucker from the sack of candy Uncle Alf brought us. I'm sitting on the ground. They're Bob's eating. This is a report card of Flora Shank, Class A, Grade 7 at Paris, Illinois. No days tardy or no days, well, 1 day tardy, no days after. Card was signed by Grandpa Shank. This is Dad and Alvin. Looks like he's hanging on to the clothesline. Grace and Alvin. Note the side pockets on the door of the car. Taken in Janesville, Wisconsin in 1938. This is Dad with a 3-team cultivator, George and Frank each with single row cultivators. Dad getting our firewood for winter. Bob and Alvin under the windmill in the front yard of the Gregory farm. Note 2 swings to the right, upper right. Top, left to right, Rupert Shank. His father, Lace Shank. Mother, Myrtle. Elizabeth Shank. Robert Shank. Clarence Shank. Grace, Flora Shank. Frank, George, May, Uncle Alf, Grace, and Alvin. Bottom, Marge Shank, Elmer Shank, and Joe Shank. This is George Shank plowing. It'd take about half a day to go one end of the field and back. Wheat field in shocks. Field south of the house across the road. Half-mile long. This is Bob and his dog. This is Frank. He had been rabbit hunting. Looks like he had some luck. One day he shot the dog instead of the rabbit. The Gregory farmhouse. The farm was a farm of 400 acres. One of the larger farms around. George, Dad, and Frank trying to break a small colt. This is Bob feeding one of his pigs. This is George, Uncle Elmer, and Aunt Flora, and Frank in Janesville, Wisconsin. Aunt Flora was my dad's sister. I was named after Uncle Elmer. This is George repairing a tire or new brakes. I helped him one day by tearing all the paper off his tire patching rubber. He didn't like that. This is Grace in Wisconsin. Evelyn Shank, Frank Shank, and George Shank. New barn being built out at the Gregory Farm. That's Frank Shank on the roof. This is George Shank on the roof. Grace. Grace and friends playing hockey in Wisconsin. George getting ready to shave May and Flora on the Gregory Farm. Sister Grace. Grace. Her friend, cousin. Grace and her dog. Al and Bob feeding the lambs. Grace and Flora on the porch at Grandpa's house. Looks like winter. Frank and Lonnie Riddle, brother to Bill Riddle, and is in the Navy in 1932. Aunt Flora and Uncle Elmer, Janesville, Wisconsin. Grandpa Shank on the porch of the old home place on North Parker Street, Albany, Indiana. That's Dick on the right. Uncle Al standing up. George and Frank and myself on the porch, I think. I don't know who's squatted. Real sunny March warm day. Sitting on the south side of the barn in the sun. That's myself sticking my tongue out. My dad, Uncle Alf, May and Alvin, Bob and his dog, George and Frank. Wisconsin picture. Uncle Elmer, Aunt Flora, Grace, Charlotte, Evelyn, I believe, George, and Frank. Grace. This is Billy Riddle. This is Frank and Grace. This is Grace and Bill and Billy. This picture was taken in Indianapolis at Flora and Ed's home. That's Flora and Ed at the top holding, I think, Eddie John. Below is May, George, Mother, Grace, myself, Dad, Frank, Bob, Al, and Shirley down in front. This was taken in about 1936. That's when Frank got out of the Navy, I think. Another picture in the same time. Eddie John, Ed, myself, Grace, Mom, Bob, George, Frank, May, Laura, Al, and Shirley. About 1936 or 38. This taken in Wisconsin. That's Flora on the right, Grace, Lillian, Lucille. Standing by Archie's new car, a Ford. Sister Grace and Lillian. Grace, Aunt Flora, Uncle Elmer, Wisconsin. This is a picture of our father, Clarence Shank. From now on, these be some of the pictures from Flourish Antrican's collection. The others were mostly from George. This is Uncle Alf and a stubborn horse or mule. This is Uncle Matt, Mother's brother, Matt Albert. Uncle Matt, Albert, and Charlie Fetters in their World War I uniforms. From left to right, Frank Albert, Grandpa Albert, Mother, and Aunt May Pittenger. Look at Mother's button-up shoes. Don't know if I had mentioned Grandfather's first name, Alfonso. Came from France. Didn't speak very little English. Grandmother was Mary Elizabeth Quilter Albert. Showing both Grandpa Albert and Grandpa Shank in the same picture. I think that's me, the baby, between Grandpa Albert and Grandpa Shank. This is Ruth Albert, her dad Frank, Grandpa Albert, and I think the baby's me. Grandpa Shank. I don't know the next three. My mother, second from the right. Third from the right, May Pitcher. Think this is Harvey Wainwright, Aunt Julia, Uncle Lonnie, and the one on the right is Bill Wainwright. Frank Shank on the right, Bill Wainwright, Ray Albert, and Butch Wainwright. I don't know the man on the left. These are Aunt Julia's children, maybe grandchildren. I'm not sure. Nancy, Doris, Jimmy, Peggy, and Carol. This is Mary Albert. Note the large slide. This was in the Albany Park. This is Aunt May Pittenger on the left. Aunt Julia Wainwright. Mother's sisters. This is Mother's two sisters, Aunt May Pittenger, Aunt Julia Wainwright, and her brother Matt Albert. This is Aunt May Pittenger, Uncle Lonnie Pittenger, and our father, Clarence Shank. This is Uncle Lonnie Pittenger, Aunt May Pittenger, and their Uncle Lonnie's children, whom Aunt May raised from when they were very young. Grandpa, Grandma, Albert, Aunt May in the rear. I don't know the others. Aunt Julia and family. This is Aunt May Pittenger, Matt Albert, Aunt Julia Wainwright. Aunt May Pittenger was married to Joe Simon's dad, and Joe had the children Jean, John, Freddie, Joe. I forget the names of the others. This is Grandma Albert and some of Aunt Julia's children. This is Flora Shank, Antrican, and Ed Antrican. This is Ed Antrican's father and mother. Family get together on the Gregory farm. Another family get together. Me on the bottom right. Frank, Flora on the right, Uncle Alf with Bob, Dad in the background, May, then I skipped one, George, and Mother far left. Flora on the right, Grace third from the right, don't know the others. Do not know these people. Rosebud's curb service. Sister Grace curb service. Restaurant. Diner. Don't know the others. Curb service. Flora and Grace. Flora and Grace in front of the Rosebud curb service restaurant. Baked chicken, roast pork, pies of all kinds. Sundays. Grace Shank. Notice the bicycle stand. Family portrait taken at the Pitcher Farm. Wainwrights, Fuller, Pittingers, Shanks. Grace on the right. I think Sybil the Armin, Flora on the left. Flora and Grace on the outside. Flora and Grace, left in the middle. Don't know the others. Flora and Grace. Cousin, Albert, and son of Aunt Julia's children. Your dad's brother, Alpheus Shank. This is Bob trying to ride a tricycle, and I'm trying to watch him from the rear. Mother helping too. Right, from left to right, Uncle Alf, Grace, Uncle Lonnie Pittenger, George, I think Max Pittenger, Frank, that's me down below with Uncle Al's hat, Grandpa Shank, May, Corrine Pittenger, and Aunt May. Dad on the right. I can't tell the ones above. That's Dad on the right in the derby hat. Flora in the upper left. I can't he called the others, I think Aunt Julia's cousins. They're children. Maybe mother in the rear. Grace, Charlotte, Archie, and Grandpa Shank.
I need to have some figures for your reporting on
This is Grandma and Grandpa's home in Terre Haute, and it's still in the family. A cousin lives there now. Uncle Abe, his family, and Dad and family, and the Gregory farm. Uncle Abe, our father, Uncle Alf, and Grandpa, Israel Ham. This is Mary and Bevan Fuller visiting the farm. Frank and Mary in the rear, George, Grace, and Bevan in the front. Don't know the make of the car. This is George Shank. I think the car is a Whippet. Frank Shank, same car. Dad and Mother, Dick Warren, George, Grace, Charlotte, May, Frank, and probably myself at the bottom. Bob in arms. Laura in the back, little Dick. Dad, Grace, Frank, Mom, Dad, Grace, George, Mom, and Frank. That's me hiding at the bottom. Or Bob, I don't know. I think this is Flora and Dick. Dad and Mother and May and Bob at the pond back of the house at the Gregory farm. Flora and Grace on the horses. Uncle Al's union card. Glass factory at Dunkirk, Indiana, 1952. This is Flora. Shank sitting on top of the fence post. The Gregory. This is Margaret Shank, Frank Shank, Joanne, George, Sidney, down below, Dean. This is Irene Shank on the left, Shirley Antrican, and Flora Antrican, and I don't know the babies. In the same picture, my father, Clarence, George, Frank, myself, Bob. And Alvin. This picture came from Grace Riddles while I was in Texas for an Army reunion, and we went to her home and visited. One of the last picnics with Aunt Julia Wainwright, Muskegon, Michigan. Same picnic. This is Frank and Margaret's wedding picture. George is the best man on the rocking horse. This is Sister Grace and myself, September 1992, San Antonio, Texas. This is a family group after eating dinner at the Muncie Mall. John Shank, my son, came along and took the picture. Myself on the left, Martha, my wife, Flora, Bob, Tilly, George, Ed, Al, and Dolores, his wife. John, Tilly, Bob, George, Al, and Dolores. Brothers and sister. Elmer, Laura, Bob, Al, and George. Ed. John Shank, my son, Flora, Tilly, Bob, George, Doris, Ed, Al, and myself. Tom Shank, Christmas in '91. Kathy Shank, Tom's wife, Emily, 3.5 years old. Kathy, myself, and Emily, 1992, Houston, Texas. This is myself, 1992, in Natchez, Mississippi. That's the Mississippi River. Frank on a 1900 drag line. Had not got it running yet. Self. John Shank, my son, and Elmer Shank. My 1930 Alice Chalmer, before I bought it. My wild cat. 1991. For 1991. Folding ramps that my son Carl and I are trying to market. John's recreational vehicle, 4-wheel. Loading on a pickup truck. Aunt May in Texas. Carl Shank, my son. His grandson, Cody. This is another grandson, Austin. Carl's grandson. My great-grandson. I've been a member for 23 years. Son John, his son Travis, daughter Katie. They call Travis TJ. Laura and Ed, August 1991. Katie Shank, August 1991. John's daughter. This is my wife, Martha, myself, my daughter, Marcia, her son, Colin. Our granddaughter, Angie Shank, at her wedding, Martha and myself. Then my wife, 1979. Martha and myself, 89. Martha Shank in front of the old, or beside the old Albany automobile made in 1908 in the Auburn Museum today. Family reunion at the old scout cabin by Bowen's filling station. Myself, 1943, before going overseas, World War II. Another family picture with Grandpa Shank, Israel. My dad in the upper right, Dick Warren, I'm not sure, Mother, George, bottom row from left, May, Frank, Grandpa, myself, and I'm not sure, and I think Uncle Alf. This is May, Walsh, myself, and I think Emily. I'm not sure. Picture taken at our home behind the schoolhouse. Mother, myself, Dad, Bob, or Al, Grace, Bob, May, Flora, Frank, and George. The complete family. Picture of our father, Clarence Oliver Shank, George Shank, Frank Shank, Elmer Shank, Robert Shank, and Alvin Shank. Margaret, I think Joanne, Frank, George, Dean, and Sidney. This is George and Sidney, Christmas 1982. Flora and Ed Antrican, 1990. This is Shirley Frank and Jim Frank. She is the daughter of Ed and Flora Antrican. Jim's mother was Amy Frank. Picture, this is Carolyn and Eddie Antrican. Flora and Ed Antrican's family, 1983. I wish people would put all their names on pictures. This is Flora, Ed, Eddie John, or Eddie, Shirley, and Larry. Larry and Eddie Antrican on the old porch of the home back of the schoolhouse. This is Flora and Ed Antrican. Their son Larry and Marge in the rear. Randy and Steve. They're two boys. March 1990. Shirley and Jim Frank. I don't know the date. This picture was taken after the funeral of Leif Shank, August 1973. Carolyn and Eddie Antrican, their 25th wedding anniversary, taken in 1981. Flora and Ed Antrican, 1981. 1987, Grandpa Albert and family in Muskegon, Michigan. This is Ed Antrican's mother's when she's 16 years old. Ed Antrican's dad. Ed's dad in the Spanish-American War. Frank, daughter of Flora and Ed Antrican. Larry Antrican, wife Marge. Children of Flora and Ed Antrican. Jim Frank, Shirley's husband. Ned, two grandsons, Eddie John and Kim. Picture taken in March 1990. Aunt Flora and their dog Peanuts. 1984. Ed and his son Larry, 1990. Flora and Ed's pride and glory. The first girl in the family since Shirley, Victoria, daughter of Eddie John and wife. Eddie and Carolyn and Eddie John. No date. Flora and Ed, August 10, 1991. The Shank family, about 1921, yeah. Me on the tricycle. I might have had this picture before. Great-grandson. Sherry, Angie's little boy. Austin Jordan Davis. Granddaughter. Kayla Maria Gonzalez. December 9, 1988. 10 months old. This is Kayla Gonzalez and her brother. And little brother Andrew. They live in Indianapolis. Marcia Cooper. Grandchildren. Dick's daughter Sheila. Her husband and 2 children. Carl's daughter Angie and her husband Bill Davis. Bob and Tilly's granddaughter, Kim's daughter Jennifer, Kim and Doug's 2 children, twins, Ryan and Kelly. This is April 92. Annie and Brenda Wash. He is son of May Shank Wash. Their 2 children and their dog, Elizabeth and Emily. Don't remember the dog's name. Flora and Ed's great-granddaughter, Victoria. My grandchildren. This is Carl's daughter, Angie. Sherry, Carl's daughter. Aaron, Marcia's son. John's boy, Travis. Angie, October 23, 1968. Sherry, October 15, 1971. Aaron, September 12, 1974. And Travis, September 24, 76. This is John Shank, Travis, and Katie. September 1990. My cat Willie 1 year later. See the Christmas tree on his nose. For Katie, John's daughter. This is Al Shank's big grandson, Cale Royer. the cradle. Hale at 4 months. Carl's daughter, Sherry. Kids, 1973, Monte Carlo. Shirley and Jim Frank and their dog. Mother and Dad, my dog Pudge, while I was overseas. Antrican, Eddie Antrican, and Shirley Antrican. The gang in a reunion in Colorado. Reunion at George's in 1978. Sister May, Shirley Frank, daughter of Sister Flora. Shirley Antrican Frank with 2 of her paintings in the background. Brother Bob with 3 of my sisters, Flora, Grace, and Addie Mae. Family picnic. Family picnic. My daughter Marcia Kay, her husband Dick Cooper, their son Aaron, and Dick's daughter and Marcia's stepdaughter Sheila. In the Albany, or in the Muncie paper. belonging to Israel M. Shank. Smith's Inductive Arithmetic. This book was published in 1858. $18.54.
This is our wedding day, September 16th, 1951. We were married at the Union Chapel Church out north of Eaton. That's Dolores Clevenger and Al Shank. Dolores' mother and father is Lucille and John Clevenger. That is Dolores' bridesmaid, Ellen Clevenger, her sister-in-law, and then her other lady there is Betty Mae Schick. And the little flower girl is Ruth Anna Clevenger. Brother Bob Shank, he is best man, and Fred Brand and Raymond Hines, they were ushers. Dolores when she was still in high school in 1949. This is Al, and he played softball for McCormick Brothers. That was about a year after we was married. We were back from our honeymoon. We stopped in Terre Haute, Indiana, and that's her grandmother, Mrs. Crockett, Reverend Crockett, that married us. That's the starting of our family. That's Deanne on the left, and Kay in the middle, and Jim on the right.
Yeah.
That was taken in August of 1963. Well, they've grown up, and that's Jim and his wife, Carrie, and his stepdaughter Jenny on the back, and Justin and Chelsea in front. That was taken in Christmas 1991. And she got her little son Brian on her lap, and then there's Heather and her husband Mike and their boy Daniel, taken in 1991, Christmas. This is Kay and her husband Gary Royer, and their little boy Cale, and their youngest little boy, Carson. That was taken in Christmas 1992. That's our family before everything started. And date on it, date on that. Well, that's Dolores when she was 4 years old. Not much change. This is Al and Dolores where it all started, August 1992. That's Al Shank, but it's taken
The Gregory Farm.
About 1930, probably. Around 1930 sometime. I don't remember. Thought maybe it was out in Dolores, but I don't, maybe in our Grape Harbor there by school. I don't remember whether that's Al Shank taken around 1940 or 42. Lizzie and Clarence Shank married October the 19th, 1903. Oh, you want to read it, or I thought maybe you just want to put it down there and let somebody else read. I mean, just read on the area, which. has, shut the recorder off. That's the 13th day. I didn't tell you what year, or 1900, but they forgot to put the whole 3 on it.
Our father, Clarence Shank.
That's Robert Shank and his first wife, Winnie. And I don't know when that was taken. That's Bob's boy, Jeff. We don't know where he's at now. Taken up at Bristol, Indiana, where Bob lived. It was on an Easter, 1969. Jeff and Jim in the back, and Kay, Kim, and Deanne in the front. This is Bob Shank and his daughter Kim and his wife Tilly. I don't know when that was taken. This is Bob's daughter Kim, just their marriage day, and she married Doug Snyder. That was in March 9th, 1985. This is Kim and Doug Snyder's children. Kelly on the left, and Jennifer in the middle, and Ryan on the right. The little boy and girl are twins, taken in December 7th, 1992. Dolores holding Kim, and Sydney's in the back. This was taken in 1943. There's Frank and Al and George and Bob Shank, and there's Dean over. And Dean, George's boy, on the right. There's Clarence Shank on the left, our dad. There's Uncle Al. There's Ed Entrykin, Bob Shank, Leif Shank, our uncle, and Elmer Shank. Taken in approximately 1946 or 7. That's Aunt Myrtle Shank, Clarence Shank, and Leif Shank, taken in 1961. That's Clarence Shank and his daughter Grace Riddle, and Grace's husband Bill Riddle, taken down at Frank's. No date on it. This is Aunt May Pittenger, which was my mother's sister, and her husband Lonnie Pittenger, taken in 1954, 83.
This is myself, Elmer, and granddaughter Katie Shank, John's daughter.
December 83.
December 83.
This is George Shank, taken at Christmas in December 1983. Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Leif Shank's family, taken at a family reunion. Up at Marge Walls in Fort Wayne. And Gertrude Wasson from Wisconsin, they were cousins of Dad's, and they had a son in the National Guard that was killed in the March of Bataan in the Philippines in World War II.
Be our cousins.
Yeah. This is Uncle Matt and Aunt Winnie up in Michigan. He was a brother to my mom, Elizabeth Shank, taken in August 1971.
Biggest mushroom owl ever found.
April of 85. Al and Bob Shank, taken in the middle 40s. I don't remember when it was taken. It was the same year, 71. This is Kay and Al Shank, and Uncle Matt Albert, and Deanne Shank, taken in 71. This is Kay.
Taken in 71.
This was, yeah, this is Butch Albert and his mother, Julia Albert, my mother's sister, and Al Shank, taken in 1971. This is my sister Addie Mae's son, Kenny Walsh, taken in 1956. This is Joanne Shank, brother Frank Shank's daughter. I don't know what year. Or 57. Grace was home from Texas, but I don't know for sure what the occasion was. Dad Shank and my wife Dolores Shank playing checkers in 1954. This was taken in 1957. The first one is Irene Shank, is Elmer's wife. Grace Riddle, my sister. Margaret Shank, Frank's wife. Dolores Shank, Al's wife. Aunt Myrtle Shank. Winnie Shank is Bob's wife. And Sister Flora Antrigan. What's that? Say what? Just shut it off. And Harry Wasson from Wisconsin and Uncle Leif Shank.
Dolores, Heather, Deanne, Ed, Flora, Martha, my wife, and the clown suit, May, and myself with her makeup, Halloween.
Dolores Now Shank took Dad Shank out to Grace's on Christmas of 1953, I think. Dolores, Dickie, Dad, Grace, husband Bill,
Billy.
Hal, sitting down.
Oh, yeah, Al. Billy.
Yeah, Billy must have took the picture. This is Kay, Deanne Shank, and Grace Riddle. We were just ready to leave their house in 1970, Lubbock, Texas. Bill Riddle, brother-in-law, taken in December 1970 in Lubbock, Texas. Kenny Walsh graduated from Notre Dame in 1971. Kenny's on the left. And this was taken to senior prom, I think, in 1971. There's Andy Hines on the left, Kibra Mays, Jody Stafford, and Alan Hines, taken at the Albany High School.
Kibra Shank now.
Now it's Kibra Shank. Shut it off a minute. It's David Shank at a Ball State University workshop, taken in 1956. This was a new CD police unit in Albany in 1959. The man on the left is Buck Moore. He was our town marshal. Bob Lothridge was the deputy marshal. Al Shank, and Bob Evans, and Frank Shank was director. They just got a new car and looking it over. This is Betty Conway, daughter of Lillian Conway, and her husband Ebert, Wally Ebert, in Janesville, Wisconsin, taken back in the middle 60s. On all their children, I don't know what name they. This Eddie and Antrigan and his now wife, Carolyn Bulin, taken back in somewhere. Age much. Grace wasn't there.
Family picture at Frank's. Frank, Al, Flora, Dad, Bob, May, Elmer, George.
It's not on. Oh, there it is. Dad Shank, May, and her husband Howard Walsh, taken in around 1954. There's another picture taken out at Grace's in Lubbock, Texas, Christmas of 1953. Dad, Dolores, Al, Grace, Billy Riddle, and Dickie Riddle in the bottom.
This picture of myself and Carl and Irene when I started the sheet metal shop back in 1954.
This is Frank Shank's family, taken in 1956. On the left is Margaret, their daughter Joanne, their son Tom, and their other daughter Margie.
Yeah. Family dinner at Al and Dolores'.
The Over the Hill Gang. This was taken in November 1948. Tom Brand, Fred Brand, Dad Shank, and Al Shank, and Bob went out to Grace's to go deer hunting. Come back empty-handed. This was taken in 1954. Bob and his wife Winnie, Dolores, and Dad on the back of our house.
Recognize her.
Taken in 1945.
Good night.
The three sisters, Lizzie Shank, Aunt May Pittenger, and Julia Wainwright. Al Shank, my mother, Elizabeth Shank, and brother Robert Shank, taken in January 1945. And then she died April 45 then. Funny how they can bring them up, isn't it? And you. Al and Bob Shank, taken in January 1945. Me. This was taken on a little ship out in Calcasieu River in Lake Charles, Louisiana in 1945. This is Al, taken in 1946 in Corpus Christi, Texas. This is Al, taken in 1946 Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Minnie Wasson, the sister of Clarence Shank, and her husband William Wasson, and their oldest child Harry.
Bob Shank, Tom Brand, and Elmer Shank, taken in 1945.
Look at that gangster with a cigar.
They're still recording. May Shank and our dog Pudge, 1945. Bob Shank, Eddie and Shirley Antrican, taken on Bob Maine's horse back in 1945. Dad Shank and his two dogs, Annie Howe and Pudge, taken in 1945. Got his comb in his mouth.
Convertible.
Don't they look good?
Go ahead. Bob, May, and Elmer, and Bob's convertible, 1945.
Bright red.
What?
No, I don't know. No, it was, Bob Shank, May Shank, and Dad Shank in 1945.
This picture was taken about 1922 or 23, because that's me down the bottom left corner. My dad, and I don't know what instrument he was playing. Maybe a guitar, or a violin. Pat Smith, or Mabel Smith, with the trombone. Sister Flora, violin. And Pat Smith, Mabel's husband, with the mandolin guitar. I bought one in an auction sale last year, and on the inside it had a price tag of $25 when it was new. Next, Grace with the guitar, Uncle Alf Shank, Dad's brother, mandolin, Dick Warren, violin. This is Clarence Needler, and he must have been leading the band. I can't see an instrument. And that's me at the bottom, the only audience they had. This is my show. I'm putting some of my children on. This is Marcia Kay when she's in high school. Shank when he is in high school. My grandchildren, Sherry Shank, Angie Shank, Aaron Cooper, and TJ Shank. Marcia's son and TJ John's son. This is Aaron Cooper, Marcia's son, 1975, 14 months old. TJ and Aaron Cooper. TJ helping his dad John put a wagon together for Christmas, 1978. Ellie Shank, John's wife, and the mother of TJ and Katie. TJ and his dog. His daughter Katie and her cat. TJ, John's son. Shank, John's daughter. House John made for Katie. Shank, TJ, and Katie, my two grandchildren. TJ and his plaque for cross-country running. He's also playing basketball for Delta High School. TJ and his dog. In 1975. This is Carl, Katie, and Colin and Marcia, and they're playing with an old medicine box that caused shock, and we'd put a quarter in a pan of water and have the kids try to reach down. Carl and his two daughters, Angie and Sherry. Katie Shank, 8 years old. Kenny Walsh, son of May, Sister May. Hard to get him all in one picture. He is now a lawyer living in Pennsylvania State College. This is Patty, Angie driving the tractor, Carl, Shelley, John, and Sherry. 1930 Alice Chalmer was seen before in water. Alan Cooper, Marcia's son. He won't like this. Jay and Santa Claus. Katie Shank, John's daughter. That's John and I. Sister May in the background. John in a high school picture. TJ, John's son. TJ. This is Carl, Patty, Sherry, and Angie. My son and two granddaughters and their mother. Son and my two granddaughters on the 1930 Alice Chalmer tractor at tractor show. John and I in front of the shop. Note the reflection of the window, in the window. I made those snips. This is Kenny Walsh, his wife Miranda, and their daughter Elizabeth. May's son. Granddaughter Katie again. TJ. Katie, John's daughter. This is Marcia's daughter, Sheila. Angie Shank, Sherry Shank, Colin Cooper, and TJ Shank. This was one of the ads in the Muncie paper of Marcia's travel agency, her and Kibra, and their helpers. Kibra is Carl's wife, and Marcia's my daughter. Carl and his two daughters, Angie and Sherry, they live along the river, Miss Mississinewa River, in Fairview, Indiana. Daughter Angie, one of her school pictures. Sherry Shank and her mother Pat, along the Miss Mississinewa River behind their home. Dick Cooper, myself, with my 1930 Alice Chalmer at the tractor show in Portland, Indiana, one of the biggest tractor shows in the country. Dick is Marcia's husband. This is Marcia and Dick's home, east and south of Fairview, Indiana, east of Albany. Carl and Patty. Carl and I building the room onto the back of the house, and I'm sitting in that room right now. It faces south, back to the river. This is Angie, Carl's daughter, husband, Bill, and their son, Austin Jordan. Carl's daughter, Sherry, school picture. This is the old lumber yard built back in the 1890s, where I have now my shop. Picture of Carl's daughter, Sherry, school picture. Shank and a friend, Tom Reinard, in a King Midget automobile. Carl's wife, Kibra, Carl's daughter, Sherry, and Kibra's daughter, Carl and his two daughters, Sherry and Angie. He's been on the police reserve for quite some time. Carl and Kibra today. Late picture. And her husband, Bill. This is Kibra's daughter, Brandy. Been Monroe Central Band, and they've won state contests 3 years in a row. A picture of Brandy. At the tractor show in Portland, Indiana, which I'm now I have a life membership card and two of the engines. And the small engine in the center I made in 1970. Every part but the spark plug and the oilers. Runs. Carl and two daughters, Angie and Sherry, and their mother Irene. To Carl's home facing the river, at Fairview, Indiana. He done most of the work himself. Daddy Carl Angie, 1970. The backyard, Angie and Sherry and TJ and Carl. Dick Cooper, Marcia's husband, his daughter Corrine, and her daughter Sarah, Michael, and Laura, 1992, Marcia's and Dick's grandchildren. My daughter Marcia K. Cooper, her son Colin. He was born on my birthday, July 15th, 1981. This is Aaron Cooper's graduation, May 1992. He is standing by his sister Sheila and his younger brother Colin. Colin with his Aaron Cooper just finished eating spaghetti and meatballs. Cooper, 10 months old, July 1975. And his dog Hoosier. Dick and Marcia's grandchildren. Of course, Aaron's Marcia's son. Aaron Cooper. Marcia at Sheila's home. 2 grandkids. And Dick in the background. And I think it's Sheila's husband. Cooper and his dog Hoosier. Australian cattle dog in Vermont. Aaron Cooper and his cat. Aaron Cooper with Dick and Marcia's grandchildren. Jimmy Shank, Al's son, and my sister May. This is Carl Shank, his wife Kibra, and Carl's uncle Brady, Irene's brother, and he's holding a picture of his father, John Alexander. This is Aunt Virginia Sewell and Katie Shank. Aunt Virginia was Irene's sister. And Brandy in the background. Aunt Virginia Sewell, Irene's sister, Marcia Kay, and myself. Sherry Shank, Kibra, Carl, Shelley, John, Brandy, TJ, myself, Angie, and Katie. Auto Week magazine, September 24, 1992. Some King Midget automobiles made in Athens, Ohio. This is showing a stainless steel dash that I made for one, then sold before I finished it. Looks like a brand new car now. Martha in our backyard. Our backyard with a little bit of high.
This is Deanne, Kay, and Jim Shank, children of Alvin and Dolores Shank, taken an Easter, March of 20.
This is the February 13th, 1993, and this is some ice looking out our back window. I hope everyone will enjoy this film. I know I could do better, and I know I made mistakes.